Hello, my name is Corinne Muller. I'm the Administrative Coordinator for the Penn Cultural Heritage Center, and today we will be addressing some key points from my own experience around building a career in cultural heritage as an early career professional. Today, I'll walk through my own education, work experience, and background. From there, we'll talk about what I've learned so far, several years into my career, about what the cultural heritage field is and is not, about diversifying your academic and professional experience, and lastly, about seeking professional opportunities and advocating for yourself. Before I go any further, I do want to provide this disclaimer that, of course, everything I say in this presentation is based on my own personal experience in the field as an early career professional. While I hope my advice will be helpful, please keep in mind that advice may vary on your own unique circumstances. To provide some context for what I'll discuss today, I will share a little about myself and my background. As I mentioned, I am the Administrative Coordinator for the Penn Cultural Heritage Center, or Penn CHC, at the University of Pennsylvania's Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology in Philadelphia. I have been associated with the Penn CHC in some way since 2019, when I began at the center as an undergraduate research assistant, working remotely from Wellesley College in Massachusetts, where I was studying art history. I worked as a research assistant at the Penn CHC for several years before taking a pause for my first full-time job after graduating college. However, I returned in the spring of 2023 as the center's coordinator. I also have work experience that includes a variety of museum internships, art history research assistantships, and even experience in editing for a public policy think tank. I'm also now a part-time graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, pursuing a master's degree in international educational development with a certificate in global human rights. My entry point into the cultural heritage field really was as a research assistant at the Penn CHC. To start, I was primarily focused on a series of projects based in Afghanistan. My activities included research on historic cultural sites that supported safeguarding efforts by local and international heritage organizations, and also supported Afghanistan's official request for a memorandum of understanding with the United States on cultural property import restrictions, grants writing and project management support for an international loan program with the National Museum of Afghanistan, and refugee management following the Taliban seizure of Kabul in 2021. In my current position, I wear many hats, supporting the center through financial management, project management across all projects and programs, events planning, grants writing and administration, and ad hoc research support. Each day looks very different, and while my kind of position may be a bit more widespread in responsibilities than others, I think you will find this true for many positions in the cultural heritage field. To further situate myself, I'll tell you a little more about the Penn CHC. As previously mentioned, we are a research, advocacy, and educational center based at the University of Pennsylvania's museum. We design and implement a broad range of cultural rights, heritage preservation, and museum studies projects, both domestically and abroad, in locations such as Ukraine, Mexico, and Syria. Our work falls broadly under the four categories of addressing Indigenous rights, supporting scholars and cultural workers at risk, safeguarding cultural heritage in conflict, and imagining ethical museum futures. Our motto is working hand in hand with communities to protect the past and secure the future. And our mission statement, which you can also see on screen, is by positioning communities in a leading role, the Penn CHC reframes the preservation of cultural heritage within a context of social, political, and economic development. We demonstrate and disseminate our strategy through field projects, research, engagement in public policy, and public programs that emphasize the centrality of community priorities for successful outcomes. This brings me to the first key point I would like to make about work in this field, and what I think all students or young professionals interested in entering this line of work should really keep in mind. And that is what cultural heritage is and what it is not. The cultural heritage field is in many ways relatively new. You can point to its origins in the 1930s and 1940s, when the protection of cultural property was brought to the fore as the world witnessed the destruction of cultural sites and looting of museums, for example, during World War II. The events of that war instigated a series of conventions and international law, as well as the formation of relevant government bodies, that more formally shaped the cultural heritage field. I'm thinking, for example, of the 1954 Hague Convention on the Protection of Cultural Property during Armed Conflict, as well as the formation of organizations like the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. But the heritage field has really grown out of archaeology and museum studies, research, and frameworks, and that growth has been a slow burn. For decades, the field has remained quite objects-focused. In my opinion, there is still a misconception that if you are an archaeologist or doing archaeological research, you are inherently working in cultural heritage. But I think this is false. Cultural heritage has to be, or it is, more than about working with historic artifacts and structures and scientifically recreating the past. At the Penn CHC, we operate with the understanding that archaeology is the study of the past, while cultural heritage is how the past is used in the present. Just because you study or work with archaeological sites, artifacts, or collections does not mean you are necessarily doing cultural heritage work. Rather, cultural heritage is about how the past is interpreted, used, and impacted by current people and events, and how it fits into their identities, lives, and even futures. Luckily, across the field, we are witnessing increasing attention from organizations and practitioners toward a more people-first approach that better integrates cultural heritage work with fields such as humanitarian aid and education. The photos that I have up on the screen are a reminder that when we talk about cultural heritage, we're not necessarily even talking about heritage from the deep past. This could include not just artifacts from 3000 BCE, for example, but cultural sites like museums, theaters, and other historic buildings that have significance for living populations. These are satellite images of the Donetsk Academic Regional Drama Theater in Mariupol, Ukraine, which was destroyed by 2 rocket attacks at the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. The Penn CHC has worked with local and international partner organizations like the Ukrainian Heritage Monitoring Lab to research this event. It's a 20th century building, but we certainly consider it within our scope of work. Notably also is that in cultural heritage, we don't just work with tangible heritage like artifacts and buildings, but also with intangible heritage like cuisine, oral traditions, and festivals. With this difference between archaeology and cultural heritage in mind, I want to discuss what sorts of academic and professional experiences can guide your work in the heritage field. As issues and approaches surrounding cultural heritage have changed since World War II, it has become an increasingly diverse field. The heritage field is becoming increasingly interdisciplinary and more integrated into areas including, but not limited to, politics, foreign affairs, humanitarian aid, data and geospatial analysis, digital security, and sustainable development. Therefore, while a background in archaeology, anthropology, history, or museum studies might be the most obvious entry point to this work, work in the field is made possible and successful through a much broader range of expertise. Accordingly, academic coursework or majors in fields such as international development, conflict studies, humanitarian aid and human rights, law, data science, and geography can be very beneficial. If these are main or even side interests of yours, do not be dissuaded from learning more and building your experience within them just because they don't seem to fall within your current conception of cultural heritage work or what that might be more traditionally perceived as. In my position, I regularly collaborate with partners at institutions and organizations such as the Smithsonian, State Department, Department of Justice, and the United Nations. This means collaborating with folks from the military, law enforcement, government, and aid organizations. Even if you ultimately do not become one of those people, understanding their perspectives and approaches and integrating them into your own work is critical. These collaborations are critical not only to implementing any sort of heritage project, but also to moving the field forward and finding innovative approaches and strategies for success. Having said that, I encourage you to cast your net wide as you move through school and pursue professional opportunities, whether that's internships, volunteering, or full-time employment. While I by no means intend to dissuade you from education and experiences that more formally fit within the traditional fields of art history, archaeology, and museum studies, From my perspective, as both an early career professional and as someone who has interviewed and hired other people to work with me, I see great value in crafting your resume through a diverse range of experiences. And I encourage you to challenge yourself to extend your coursework, training, and professional development beyond formal subject matter expertise. Focus on building hard skills and diversifying your professional experience. In my experience, I have seen the areas of need for professional skills in the cultural heritage field greatly overlap with the skills necessary for work in the nonprofit sector, especially as an entry-level professional, but even in more senior positions, you'll need to wear a lot of hats. It's an inevitability of the field, whether you're working at a museum, a nonprofit arts organization, an academic research center, or even in the government. It is undeniably helpful to have a robust subject matter expertise in a certain geographic region of the world, for example. But in cultural heritage, it's rare that your work would be exclusively concentrated in a region or with a certain group of people. While interest and knowledge in these places and their languages and culture are very helpful, what I have found most necessary to successful work in the field, and what I hope more early career professionals will bring to the table, are skills in areas such as communication, fundraising and development, and project management. In my view, these are the skills that will bridge your experiences, improve the quality of your work, make your work more impactful, and open more doors for you professionally. To build these skills, I strongly encourage you to pursue opportunities beyond academia, fieldwork, and traditional research. Consider volunteering or interning with nonprofits, government agencies, and even media firms to diversify your experience. When I'm hiring assistants or interns, the first thing I look for in applications is strong writing skills, which is usually demonstrated through a strong cover letter, or evidence for being able to handle basic data processing, which suggests strong organizational abilities, attention to detail, and patience. Those are key building blocks for work in this field. Obviously, you can't be an expert in everything, but having a taste of these various experiences, approaches, and skills is important. And where you're not an expert, learn to lean into your connections. Collaborations make work in heritage possible. The heritage field currently suffers from a dearth of networking and strong partnerships. So, in your internships, volunteering, school, and work, I encourage you to focus on building strong relationships, not just for your own professional development and enrichment, but also with an eye for people who could be a future ally or someone you might want to collaborate with in the future. If you are actively seeking professional opportunities, be proactive, be your best advocate. I ended up in my current position because when I was an undergraduate, the person who is now my direct supervisor gave a public lecture on his work in cultural heritage during the war and refugee crisis in Syria. I was fascinated by his lecture, and afterward I approached him, introduced myself, and asked if he could use a hand on any of his projects. He did, and the rest is history. Similarly, a colleague of mine has successfully secured a position both at my organization at Penn and with the Smithsonian by sending out a cold email, pitching himself and his interest and requesting work in any form. Luckily, the field is predominantly moving away from unpaid work and a reliance on volunteers, so there are more opportunities out there now than even 5 years ago that are paid in some way. The cultural heritage field has also significantly migrated to professional networking on LinkedIn just in the past couple of years. So I strongly suggest spending time curating your profile, keeping an eye on upcoming lectures or events near you that are posted on that platform, and even cold contacting experts for advice or to ask about opportunities within their networks. It is honestly a small and competitive field, so you do have to work to make yourself heard and to shape your own opportunities. I hope that this has been helpful and informative as you continue shaping your educational and professional decisions in cultural heritage. Thanks for listening and good luck in all your pursuits.